This is episode 92 of the Real World Wellness Podcast. Hi everyone, I'm Christine Lehman, a nutritional therapy practitioner and the reverse diabetes coach, which is also the name of my website. I see clients in person and remotely, and you can contact me using my contact form on my website. Again, that's reversediabetescoach.com. Please remember while you're listening to the show, advice and information we provide is intended to be helpful and informative, but is not a substitute for medical advice or treatment. So today we're going to talk about part 2 of my journey with chronic conditions. And last episode I went over chronic sinusitis and some factors that contribute to that and some remedies for it. So today I'm going to get into osteopenia and osteoporosis and talk about supplements, nutrients, of course, which cover supplements and food sources, as well as what are risk factors to avoid and what type of exercises are recommended. And it's quite an eye-opener for me personally because I had some general ideas before I got my test results about what works, and they were correct, but they were pretty general. So now I've had a chance to delve more into the specifics and the weeds and the details, and a lot of this information does come from Lara Pizzorno's book, Your Bones, and I had interviewed her in a previous episode, so I'll make that link available as well. But I also recommend that you buy her book because it's really very well researched, and so it has plenty of studies to back up a lot of the claims that she's making and statements and so on. And it's a really good resource and covers pretty much the areas that I'm talking about today. So I want to go ahead then and get started with my latest test results. So that was from what is called a DXA scan, and they measure a couple things. One is your lumbar spine, and the second thing is your hip femur, and they use the term neck, and that's this very specific portion of your hip femur. If you look, you can easily Google this, at a diagram of your bone, you'll see that the neck is right up there in the next to the joint ball, so to speak. So it's fairly high up there. So the scan just took about no more than a couple minutes, and they basically covered what I think of as my lower trunk and then this hip femur. So what was a little disconcerting, I guess, is that now I'm in the beginning stages of osteoporosis. So I knew I was osteopenic several years ago. The last time I had this done was at least 15 years ago, maybe longer. And to be honest, I wish I had taken it a little more seriously back then, but that was before I really got serious about nutrition. So it is what it is, as they say. Now I'm taking it very seriously, hence the book, hence the interviews, and my own research. So you're fortunate in a way, because as I'm going through this journey, you can learn from me, and I hope it's helpful. So going back to the test scores, I think it's important to have a baseline. So that was one of the reasons that I went and had the DXA scan done, which was covered by my insurance. And so there were the two measurements. They're called T-scores, and the lumbar spine and the hip femur, and again they call it the neck. And so if there is any good news in this, one of the scores was at the tail end of osteopenia. So they use standard deviations as a measurement. So osteopenia is 1 to 2.5. And then osteoporosis is classified as 2.5 and up to 5.0. So my second score was 2.7. So that's where I'm saying I'm in the beginning stages here. because, sorry, I'm looking at my chart online and giving you the data at the same time. Here we go. So yeah, the lumbar spine T-score was 2.7. So that puts me, again, 2.5 is the tail end of osteopenia, the last score. So that puts me in the very early stages of osteoporosis. For the left femoral neck, that score was 2.5, so that's still slightly within the range of osteopenia. But as I told my primary care doc, who wrote me the order at my request for these tests, it's not good. So it's just like pre-diabetes is kind of a wake-up call to get your blood sugar under control and pay attention to your diet and exercise. The same thing is true of, being classified as osteopenic. So the good news is I'm doing some things right already, but I will tell you about what changes I'm making. So as I said before, you can benefit from that. So I would strongly, if you hadn't had a DEXA scan at all, I would recommend getting one. And if you haven't had one in at least 5 years, and especially if you're postmenopausal, I would strongly urge you to get one just to see where you're at, because things can evolve, especially if you're not, maybe you're not exercising or your diet isn't great. This is one way to find out how it's impacting you, because these things are very important. You can even reverse to some extent, and I'm using that word cautiously, but one reason I've been reading Lara book is she was able to improve her score, meaning she was in the high range like me. She was in a similar place and got her score through supplement, diet, and exercise to much lower in this scale of osteopenia. So, and other people, as I'm talking more about it, I've realized have been able to do that with the right supplements and diet and exercise. I would discourage you from going the medication route right off the bat. Laura does a good job of explaining the reasons why, but in a nutshell, they have a lot of adverse side effects, which when you think about pharmaceuticals is not necessarily surprising. And even my doctor only pointed out one of them, but I told her, she automatically prescribed me Fosamax, and luckily I've learned to say, whoa, let's stop and have a discussion about this, and I want to do my own research. So I had already researched algae cal and calcium from algae sources, and anyway, I was going to go the natural route. So, but back to the side effects of Fosamax and this is a category of medicine called bisphosphonates, and so that includes brand names like Fosamax and there's some other ones that are reclassed, Aclasta, and so on, Zomida. Fosamax is probably one of the better known ones. But anyway, some of the other symptoms include esophageal cancer, which is obviously serious, influenza-like illness, myalgia, which is severe muscle pain, deterioration of kidney function and kidney failure, symptomatic hypocalcemia, where you have too little calcium in your blood circulating, and it can increase fracture risk. So bisphosphonates are not something to be taken lightly. I would only use it if you're not making progress through the kinds of things that I'm saying today, and I would do it cautiously and seriously consider the pros and cons. Okay, so with that cautionary note, I would And let me just add one thing. Oral bisphosphonates, one of the increased risks that my doctor did point out was inflammatory jaw disease. And she said that the risk of that was very small. However, I think Laura would disagree with that, but it's best to always do your own research. And she does quote some studies in here. I don't know what sources my doctor was using. So when I heard that, I just thought, that's why I wanted to look into this further. So I'm sticking with my new chapter, my calcium supplement, which has, again, based on Laura's experience with something similar called Algae Cal, she was able to see some significant improvement in her scores. So that's the discussion I had with my own primary care doc was, let me do this basically my way, the natural way, and I will get retested on the DEXA scan and by the end of the year, which is at least 6 months from now. And if I don't see any improvement, then I'm happy to talk to you again about Fosamax. But knowing what I know, I am reluctant to take it. So to finish up on what I'm taking, I mentioned a New Chapter supplement, and the brand is, New Chapter is, I think, a very high quality brand. The sourcing of your calcium is important, whether it's from limestone or from algae. Algae seems to be superior. In this case, New Chapter gets it from the algae in Iceland, and it's like very wild and sustainable, and I like that as well. So if you cannot get your calcium from a plant algae like that, then at least get the calcium citrate rather than carbonate. That is superior quality, and it is better absorbed from what I've read. So also Algae Cal is, I think, the one that Laura recommends is a very good quality supplement. However, when I looked it up, I found it to be a bit more expensive than the one I'm using. But if you can afford it, go with that. The only difference between New Chapter and Algae Cal, which I believe is the brand name they use, is that there is less strontium used, which can help improve bone density, which is what you want in my supplement. But the reason for that is that it can compete with calcium for absorption. So even Lara, who takes Algae Cal, recommends that if you're going to take a higher dose of strontium, that you do it later in the day so you're not competing. In other words, don't take it at the same time that you're taking your calcium supplement. So I think the New Chapter people who formulated this supplement knew that, and therefore they put a much smaller dose of strontium in it in my Bone Strength Take Care supplement. So I may order a separate strontium supplement. I would read Laura's book to get more information about that. It is important to get the right type of strontium. The other thing that I like about New Chapter is that their strontium is also from algae. The magnesium is from algae. There are other trace minerals. Silicon and vanadium are from algae. And so that I like. And they refer to it as this red algae in Iceland. Now, the other important nutrient here is vitamin D3 as calciferol, and that is very important for the absorption of calcium. So you always want to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D3, and also you want to get not only vitamin K1, which is the MK4 form, but vitamin K2, because that helps deposit the calcium directly into your bones. So the MK7 form is really critical, and you want the milligrams to be somewhat higher of the vitamin K2 than the K1. For example, here it's 45 micrograms versus 35. And sources of vitamin K2, one of the main ones is natto. Now, I brought that up with Lara, who made kind of a squeamish sound, but to be fair, it is an acquired taste for many people. It is also, I didn't find it can be a little smelly, but that was her big complaint. I think she compared it to dirty sneakers or something. I didn't have that reaction at all. For me, it was very mild. It didn't smell. I didn't notice anything. And I actually like the kind of gooey texture a little bit. It's stringier, more stringy than gooey. So what it is fermented soybeans, and it is super rich in vitamin K2. So you can either get it in supplement form, and you can just order organic, non-GMO natto from people. Asian markets might have it. You can order it online. There's a company in California that produces it, and I've bought mine at an organic market and to try it out before I ordered like a caseload of this. So I would order it in quantity because I really enjoyed putting it on my scrambled eggs. You know, once I realized I liked it, then I was fine eating it right out of the little container. But you don't need a lot of it to get a real whopping of vitamin K2. But again, if you're not into natto or find it hard to get, you want to get it in the supplement because vitamin K2 is very important for depositing or targeting calcium to your bones, which is what you want. So then there are these trace minerals, boron, magnesium is also very important, selenium, and so on. She lists all of them in her book. For that, I also recommend that you take a high-quality multivitamin and mineral. So, which is, New Chapter does sell one. I haven't tried it yet, but the emphasis on, getting citrate and not carbonate, and algae sources if you can get it for your minerals, as I mentioned in this New Chapter supplement that I now have. And there are other vitamins that are important. I'm not going to exclude vitamin C or the B complex and so on. With vitamin D3, again, if you want to, you can easily get a blood test to determine what your levels are. And I suggest that you do that maybe every other year. Mine is normal. I'm out in the sun usually for at least 30 minutes a day, which helps with vitamin D3 absorption. It's also found in salmon, which is a great fatty fish full of omega-3. This supplement that I'm taking mainly, more for calcium, but again, it has vitamin D3 in it, which is good. I also want to talk about risk factors or things that you should avoid, because just the way certain foods and nutrients build up your bone density, there are certain ingredients and types of beverages that can further degrade it. So you need to be careful about what you're ingesting. And unfortunately, for all us coffee lovers out there, caffeine can impact your absorption of calcium. And so you may not be aware that taking vitamins at the same time as a cup of coffee can interfere with the body's absorption of many necessary nutrients. Caffeine causes calcium to be excreted in your urine and feces. For every 150 milligrams of caffeine ingested, which is about the amount in a standard cup of coffee, 5 milligrams of calcium is lost. So caffeine can cause you to deplete your stores of calcium. And unfortunately, for a study of postmenopausal women, and I'm in this category, found that those who consume more than 300 milligrams of caffeine lost more bone in the spine than women who consume less. So that would be at least 2 cups or more a day. So caffeine also inhibits the amount of calcium that is absorbed through the intestinal tract. Sorry about that, my computer's talking to me. And depletes the amount retained by the bones. So you certainly, if you're drinking a lot of caffeine or caffeinated beverages, you increase your risk of hip fracture. So this is not a good picture here. So I would say limit yourself, if you can, to 1 cup a day. I'm going to have to follow this myself. Now, I don't drink black coffee. I never have enjoyed that. And I think that kind of works in my favor because I tend to put in close to a 1/4 cup of whole, grass-fed, pastured, organic milk that I get from a farmer. So I've never liked black coffee. And so if you do drink coffee, and a lot of people do, including me, that is, I think the lesson here is just to limit your consumption so that you're not getting more than a cup. Certainly no more than 2 cups because of the risk factors that I just listed. I also use something called Dandy Blend, which is extracts of dandelion and a few other chicory root and I think another herb. That is considered a coffee alternative, and so you might try experimenting with that. Again, it's called Dandy Blend. You can order it on Amazon or through the company Dandy Blend, and it has a nice flavor. So what I've also done is mix about 1/3 of that, or even up to half, with my coffee. So I'm not drinking as much, I'm not in my coffee maker putting as much ground coffee. I'm mixing the two together. So if you can do things like that or even switch over to Dandy Blend, I'm going to try getting more Dandy Blend versus coffee, increasing that ratio. So maybe it's like 2/3 Dandy Blend and 1/3 coffee. And then just making sure you're not drinking more than 2 cups, even with that ratio. If you can try to limit the actual coffee to 1 cup a day. I think it would be hard to give up coffee altogether, but you can see why it can have some real negative impacts if you're not careful about that. So moving on to alcohol, and I certainly enjoy a good glass of wine, but the threshold here for, again, not degrading your bone density is 2 glasses of wine daily. So if you have 1 glass of wine, it shouldn't really negatively impact your bone mass, but if you go beyond 2 glasses, then you're risking more bone degradation. So, I'm big on moderation. I enjoy a glass of wine, but I've become more aware of this since I, been diagnosed with this early stage osteoporosis. So, I have to, I usually don't drink more than 2 glasses. Another trick I use is using smaller glasses. So sometimes I inherited a set of really nice wine and liqueur glasses from my parents, and they're really range from really teeny to large. So I use the smaller ones, which makes me feel like I'm having a little something, like a nice little aperitif, but it's not it's not a full-size glass at all. All right, sorry to be a Grinch here, but I thought about all this, especially she didn't cover caffeine in her book, Lara, so I went ahead and researched it on my own, and it also, frankly, can interfere with your body's absorption of iron and so on. So I'll put the link to that in the show notes. So moving on here, I want to talk about some food sources as well of calcium and vitamin K2, and then talk about exercise. So common food sources of calcium, besides, most people think of milk, right? They think of dairy, which, is certainly factual. A cup of cow's milk has 297 micrograms of calcium. However, yogurt, which I'm a bigger fan of probiotics and cultured dairy, which is more primal. So yogurt, and I don't believe it has to be low fat, but a cup of yogurt by comparison is 447 milligrams. So going with the yogurt and the kefir, I think, is a great way to get your calcium plus probiotics. Beyond that, canned salmon actually has 300 milligrams of calcium. Sardines also has 240 milligrams of calcium. So people don't always think about seafood, but seafood has calcium in it too. Of course, the leafy greens, and I'm always going to tell people, eat your leafy greens, kale, spinach, Swiss chard. A cup of steamed kale is 94 milligrams. However, steamed spinach is 245 milligrams. Again, that's 1 cup of calcium. So spinach has more calcium in it than kale. And collard green steam also is similar in the amount of calcium. Sardines also is a good source of 2 ounces, has a decent helping of calcium. So seafood, leafy greens, and dairy, in particular, I recommend the cultured dairy is the best way, and to get more calcium dense foods. Now, as far as vitamin K2, there's a little overlap with leafy greens, and I believe kale is a good source of that. So kale, to give you an idea, has 547 micrograms. That's 1 cup chopped kale. Now that's raw. Sometimes I like to saute my kale in a little extra virgin olive oil and a little sea salt. So I'm not sure if that helps, if it increases the amount of vitamin K. And to be clear, this is K1, not K2. Swiss chard has about 300 micrograms. Again, the measurement here is a cup. Interestingly, a quarter cup of parsley, raw parsley, has 246 micrograms of vitamin K2. Cooked broccoli, 220 micrograms. Raw spinach, 145. And then it goes down from there. So again, leafy greens really gives you that K1, and broccoli also does. So if you just have Swiss chard and spinach and kale, you're going to get some decent calcium and vitamin K1 in there. But again, vitamin K2 is particularly helpful as well, so you want to make sure you're getting both, with vitamin K2 being a bit higher than K1. Now, exercise is very important. I had heard for a long time about weight-bearing exercises being good for preventing osteoporosis and improving osteopenia, and that is true. So that is something I remembered from researching this condition when I was first diagnosed with it, again about 15 years ago, maybe even 20. So I've always exercised, and I think that has helped. However, I'm learning the devil's in the details, which is a great Washington, D.C. phrase, because they're in the context, though, of political legislation, but it's true of many things in life. So the reason I'm saying that is, first of all, rhythmic exercises are best for weight bearing. This includes jogging, even brisk walking. It can be a Zumba class. It can be cycling. What is not as good, and I was disappointed to read this, is swimming, because swimming just doesn't move you against gravity as much. So intuitively, when I read that, it did make sense to me. I mean, she used the analogy of floating in water, and that I can understand, but even swimming just doesn't generate enough resistance. So she also Riley recommends Pilates. If you've heard of Joseph Pilates, he is back in, I want to say, the 30s. He generated this or created this method of movement which was designed to help returning veterans rehabilitate. And that is how the Pilates method originated. And as you know, there's different forms There's the mat and the reformer, and both of them she recommends. But the key point here is that you do Pilates aimed for osteoporosis if you have it. So I would be inclined to follow that advice given where I am now. And then once I get more solidly and back into the osteopenia range, then I can adjust what I'm doing again. And the reason for this is standard Pilates can involve raising your neck. For example, in the 100, which I've done many times, you're both raising your legs and your neck, and that can strain and it's almost like you're compressing your spine and your upper spine, and that you want to avoid that kind of exercises that do that. So what I like about Lara's book is that in the exercise section she has pictures, and she works with these Pilates stot instructors who have designed exercises specifically for people with osteoporosis. So she correctly points out that you can do things the wrong way and end up causing more harm. So I'm very glad I read that in preparation for my podcast today, because I have been doing that. I've been raising, even doing some crunches, with my arms behind my neck and raising my upper spine, and that is something I need to avoid and be more mindful of. So it is important to get the form down, and the only way I would have known about this was reading her book. So that I would recommend Pilates. And the other thing I want to mention is I am a tennis player, and that also is really good for weight-bearing exercise, and I play 3 times a week. And then I also do walking. Now when I walk, I jog and I walk briskly, and that's very important too. You need to kind of pick up the pace and push yourself a little bit. It's not casual walking. So you need to develop an exercise program for yourself, and you need to pay attention to what you're drinking. Again, ratchet down if necessary on the caffeine and the alcohol. Make sure you're getting enough. If you like kefir, I love kefir. I buy it because of all those probiotic strains weekly from the farmer. Some little whole milk is probably okay as well, but yogurt is another good source of calcium. And I would check out a supplement, either Algae Cal or New Chapter as well. So those are my recommendations for if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis. And let me know how it goes. I would love to hear from you as I'm on this journey myself and making changes to fine-tuning my regimen, as they say. And next week I'm going to talk about perimenopausal health and how it impacts your hormones. And I'm going to do at least a 4-week series on this topic. So next week will be the kickoff, and then I've lined up speakers to discuss various aspects of that who are pretty well known in their particular field. So that should be exciting. I'm looking forward to that series kicking off next week and running it through July. So stay tuned for that, everyone, and have a great, healthy week.